Welcome to the Fatal Facts of Fentanyl. This is dedicated to raising awareness of the illicit fentanyl crisis hitting the USA. It is killing tens of thousands of people who suffer from substance abuse, disorders, and first-time users. There are no boundaries. It is straight across the board with a number of deaths without any regard to race, sex, socioeconomics, age, education, religious background, or location. It is in every community within our country. The fentanyl crisis is deadlier than ever before for various reasons. It is time to address the many issues surrounding this crisis. It is time to listen and learn from experts. It is time to hear the many stories from people who have lost their loved ones due to death by deception. Change begins with each of us as individuals and collaboration with others towards this positive transformation. The goal is to save lives and families from this travesty. Awareness and education are the key. Knowledge is power. I am your host, Lisa Carol Cood, an educator and advocate to help bring awareness to the fentanyl crisis touching every facet of our society. I am a mother who recently lost her son to fentanyl poisoning. I know firsthand the pain of grief surrounding the loss of my firstborn son. I created this podcast in hopes of channeling my heartbreak and put my energy into trying to prevent similar tragedies. I find solace and strength in working to spare other families a similar grief and any person battling this addiction. Tragedy has a way of being something powerful. This is in honor of my beautiful son's life, forever 32. Right here on Fatal Facts of Fentanyl, you will learn from experts on the front line combating the many issues surrounding fentanyl. You will hear personal stories from families and friends who have lost their loved ones and have taken their grief and pain to turn it around to make positive changes and bring awareness and education. You will also listen to people who have struggled with an opioid addiction and are still struggling and are now in active recovery. All of us share a common bond. We are all here to make a difference. We are all here to bring you the fatal facts of fentanyl. Let's end the stigma of addiction and the placing blame on the individual and their loved ones. No one is immune in our society. My next guest is Kelly, who understands this fact firsthand. Kelly is the mother of Peyton. When Peyton was 16 years old, he was diagnosed with Hodgkins Lymphoma. He had extensive treatments and surgery. The high doses of steroids deteriorated his hip bones. He suffered with extreme pain. He would cry to his mama, "All I want is a normal life." At 19 years old, he had a full hip replacement and was prescribed pain medications. This began Peyton's journey with an opioid addiction. Kelly, though very painful, please share with our audience Peyton's story. His story is very special and unique as he is as an individual. Our audience needs to hear the facts. You and I have shared with each other our stories. We both feel strongly that transparency is so important in addressing the many issues of addiction. We agree the stigma needs to stop.
Thank you, Lisa, for having me today, and I cannot agree enough. I had about the stigma needs to stop. I had no idea about addiction until firsthand I experienced it myself. And this came from a place where, as you said, my son was diagnosed at age 16 in high school. He was a football player. He had all of his, high school life going for him. And then one day he has a lump come up on the side of his neck, and we go to the doctor and they start running tests, and he's diagnosed with Hodgkins lymphoma. By the next week, we're at St. Jude Hospital. And he went through extensive treatments, for a young boy at 16 years old. He's out of school. He's out, can't play football for his remaining high school years. He's, having chemotherapy and, like I said, the high doses of prednisone, the surgeries, the opiates he had to have because of pain during the surgeries. And he didn't have a normal life as any other 16 years old. He didn't want to be thought of as the child of, I'm the kid with cancer at school. He would say that a lot. Mom, I don't want to be thought of as the kid with cancer. I just want to live a normal life. So that causes a lot of psychological problems for a child, which St. Jude does. They offer during treatments because they understand this. And they understand it can cause psychological issues with people. A lot of people don't understand that with childhood cancer, that these children as adults are 2 to 4 times likely to be on antidepressants. They're 2.5 to 5 times likely to fill a prescription for opiates. And, because of the big pharma companies that we've had in the past, or how they used to hand out all of the opiates, they don't give opiates. So where do these children turn? They go to the streets. And that's what happened in Peyton's case. And we saw some signs of, by the time he was a year after he went through treatment, he started having the pains in his hips, and then he was diagnosed with a vascular necrosis. And what that is, a vascular necrosis, is due to the high doses of steroids, it deteriorates your hip joints. It deteriorates any joints in your body. Some people have had shoulder replacements. Some people have had wrist replacements, knee replacements, ankle replacements. And Peyton's, it deteriorated his hips. So for 2 or 3 years, he was in and out of St. Jude after his treatment for the Hodgkins lymphoma, and he was having something called core decompressions. And they were trying to save his hip. What core decompressions is where they fill your hip joints in with like a cement. So he's in all this pain. They're giving him opiates. They're putting him, under anesthesia each time they're doing these core decompressions. And his hips were just crumbling. And by the age 19, he's having to have a full hip replacement. He couldn't walk. He's limping and, trying to do go to school, go to college, and he's in pain. And when the doctor did his hip replacement, he came in and told us his hip just crumbled in his hand. So imagine your joints, you're in so much pain. You want pain medicine. You want that to stop that pain. After he's learning to walk again, with his new hip. And I remember after he got out of surgery, he said that medicine made him feel good. And I didn't think anything of it. I'm just thinking, because he's not in pain anymore, of course that made him feel good. But with these opiates, it changes the brain chemistry. And what I've learned now that I didn't know then, that I wish even St. Jude would have educated families on, is the possibility of opiate addiction. But 1 in 4 people are addicts. And that can be the person, you think about that. Let's just say at church, you have a person sitting in front of you, you have a person sitting beside each side of you, and you have a person behind you. 1 in 4 people are addicts. They may have not gotten that right drug, or it could be sex, it could be gambling, it could be anything that forms addiction, but 1 in 4 people are addicts. And once they are addicts and they recognize that, out of the whole general population, 3% of addicts recover.
Kelly, I so appreciate your honesty and transparency with this. That means so much. Thank you so much. Your story, Peyton's story, is truly just heartbreaking, but needs to be shared so people will open their hearts, open their minds, and have compassion and understand that, quote unquote, addicts are not second-class citizens, okay? And it's like they should not be looked upon or stigmatized. And thank you for sharing this. I understand Peyton was in remission for 1 year and 8 months, and he conquered this childhood cancer. Did you ever think in a million years that his illness would lead to this opioid addiction that innocently began with prescription drugs? And like you stated, you wish the doctors or hospital would have told you. Well, perhaps they didn't know themselves back then. I don't know. There's so much controversy about that. I mean, prescribed pain medication is necessary, but they do have strong addictive components to them. And like you said, 1 out of 4 people have an addiction. And this is probably the most potent, unfortunately deadly addiction that we have and we need to face. I want to ask you something. I know through Peyton's addiction, can you lead us into the treatment that he sought and how he so desperately did not want to have this, and what he did, as an individual to conquer it, what you did as his mom? And can you elaborate on what Suboxone is and the Vivitrol shot is for our audience so they will know?
Yes. Well, before Peyton passed away, he was actually 7 years cancer-free. February 15th of 2021, he celebrated 7 years of being cancer-free. And probably the last 2 years of his life is when we really saw that he had an addiction to these opiates. And when we learned that, he had this addiction to Percocets, we got him into treatment immediately. And that came after a car accident. And when we took him there, we did not even, I don't even think we even realized at that time of how this this addiction had a hold on him. And until he got out of the rehab, which he just did a detox for a couple of weeks. And when he came home, he was going through secondary withdrawals. And during those secondary withdrawals, I was like, wow, we really have an issue and with this. And I seeked out therapy. I seeked out an addictionologist for him, and they started educating me on addiction. And through that is when I learned these statistics and learned how many people recovered and learned about all the different plans of needing to do the 12-step programs. And again, all of those are not guaranteed because that's 3% of addicts recover. And so one of the things, by that October of that same year, we went to a long-term addiction center in Nashville, Tennessee, and we learned about the Vivitrol shot. And with that Vivitrol shot, that is an opiate blocker, and it blocks the opiates. It's just one simple shot once a month. And he would get it every 28 days. And so during that time, it made him so lethargic. It had side effects on him that he couldn't function. And like with every drug that is administered to someone, you have those possibility of side effects. And that he decided he didn't want to do that. And it kind of puzzles me sometimes of why you're trying to get off drugs, but then they give you another drug to get you off of that. That's always been a little puzzling to me. But that Vivitrol shot, once it runs out of your system, what I learned from Peyton and saw is those cravings came back twice, 2 to 3 times more. And so February 13th, he got off, February 9th, he came off that Vivitrol shot. He decided because he wanted, in his mind, he thought, okay, I'm good. Just like what I compare it to is if you're taking antibiotics and you think after you start feeling well, after a little while, you're good. You don't take your full prescription. And then all of a sudden it comes back, the virus or the sickness comes back. Same with this. Those cravings came back, and they came back with a vengeance. And once they came back, those signs of his addiction, I could tell something was wrong. And he was back out seeking drugs. But this time, he didn't get that Percocet that he thought he was going to get. He got 43 nanograms of fentanyl. And that fentanyl is what ended his life.
I am so sorry. But sorry is not enough. This country needs to do something to combat this. I was going to ask you, how do you feel about your statement? You quoted this, "My son did not overdose. He was poisoned. 43 nanograms per milliliter of fentanyl. He was a victim of a drug-induced homicide. He should be on this earth. He did not want to die. How do you feel about that, Kelly?
I know that with the stigma, and that's why we say the stigma needs to stop, that my son did not want to die. He talked about his dreams and his admirations. He loved sports. He loved music. He loved life. You know, he wanted to be something in this world, and he fought that addiction. He was ashamed of that. He did not want to be thought of as a drug addict, and he's very ashamed of it. But he and I were very close, and he talked to me about his dreams. He talked about his fears. He just wanted people to be proud of him. And I know for a fact that if 2 millimeter that can kill a person
Mm-hmm.
of fentanyl, and 43 nanograms was in his toxicology report, that is murder. That is pure murder. And I know my son did not want to die.
I know my son didn't want to die from this either. And speaking to all the parents that we know across this country, and in the groups that we are in, we know for a fact that our sons and daughters did not want to die. And these quote unquote accidental overdoses need to be treated as homicides in this country. And I know that you feel strongly about that also. Kelly, everything that you've learned throughout this, what is your hope for not only yourself and your family, but for every person in our country right now? What do you hope happens?
I hope that a lot of the verbiage can be changed. As you said, that it's not an overdose, that it is actually a drug-induced homicide. I know who sold Peyton the drugs, and I know that since he died, that there has been at least 4 other people that has lost their life as well, and that I know for a fact. And what I would like to see is that these people that justice is served, that these dealers are caught, and that it's not a slap on the wrist, that they have to serve this time. And I mean, they're taking lives, and that's just a small portion of this. You know, it goes so much deeper. As you know, us as grieving mothers, we're having to fight, you know, to be a voice for our children. But as everyone else sees and says, that's in part that has lost their children. I mean, we know that China's selling it to Mexico, and these borders need to be closed, and we need a strong government behind us to represent us.
We do. We have so many issues surrounding illicit fentanyl crisis and travesty hitting our society, and it's increasingly getting worse. And it's going to, until something is done. And I just hope our audience really listened and learned from Kelly's transparency, This is an attribute that she always taught Peyton. He could always come to her without having judgment. That's unconditional love. As you can hear, a substance use disorder is a disease. It's not something that can be logically explained or a failure on the part of the individual or parents or their loved ones. Nor is your loved one's addiction something for which you must navigate alone, even though it does feel that way at times. Sometimes as a parent, you are between a rock and a hard place. There's a thin line between love and enabling. Every parent tries to do the best at their ability to help their child. Please try not to quickly judge or do the blame game. That helps no one. Stigma is a fundamental hindrance to the United States opioid, now illicit fentanyl crisis. Open your hearts and minds and stop the stigma. Our children are more than a label attached to them. Our children's lives matter. No one wants to be an addict, and I know for damn sure no one wants to die as one, especially to the illicit fentanyl that is growing and growing and growing in our country. Wake up. Thank you, Kelly. Hold on to your strong faith. It's not easy. There's always hope. And I just want to say my continued prayers for you, my friend, my love for you and your family. And God bless you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Lisa.
To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe to this weekly podcast. Visit our website, which is linked below in the description. On the website, click on the social media icons and feel free to share this podcast with others. And also, please leave your reviews and ask questions that you would like for me to ask our guest for our next episode dealing with the fatal facts of fentanyl. Enjoy your week. Many blessings.